So as I was reading about, your stories and so on, there are two things that really stuck with me, two moments, let's just say. So obviously the moment that everybody has probably asked you when you were 3 and you asked your dad about, the cartoon. So can you talk me a little bit into that? What happened? And
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't remember everything perfectly when I was quite that young. That's just kind of like our best guess as to like possibly what could have sparked it. We think maybe it was 3, 4, 5, somewhere along those lines. But yeah, the main reason why we think it was the cartoon The Backyardigans is really it's the only place we can think of that I would have heard the word Mars or space or anything like that to even start asking questions about it. But basically, I had like the poster for that episode of the Backyardigans Mission to Mars in my bedroom. Anyway, one day we were like, maybe that's it. So that's just kind of what we think could have been the start of it. Like I said, because my dad definitely like remembers me coming and asking about Mars and space, but as to what started those questions, yeah, the cartoon's just kind of our best guess.
yeah, and it's a nice story. It's almost like a little legend, like a good inspiration story, and it's down to that. And one other thing that really stuck with me was the little nickname Blueberry. And at the very beginning, I couldn't find the reason why, and I had to dig down a little bit. But if you can, talk me through that as well, because it was really cute.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so basically, like a call sign is essentially like a nickname, but it has to be given to you. So it kind of like originated because the first astronauts were like military pilots, and basically the military pilots, after flying, they would go out drinking with each other, and they'd have funny stories of each other, and so they'd give each other nicknames, and they'd use it while they were flying. And so, since so many of those pilots became astronauts, they used it in the astronaut corps as well. Which, of course, now astronauts have their call signs nonetheless. But basically, the second time I went to space camp, I wanted one of the flight suits like everyone else was wearing, or that I saw just because I wanted to be an astronaut. So of course I wanted to look like one as well. And so yeah, so I wanted one, but I was a little too small to fit in any of like the actual ones that they had. But my dad ended up finding kind of like more of like a knockoff, just whatever suit to put me in, and it was just not really the right shade of blue. It was a really dark shade of blue, and so everyone told me I looked like a blueberry while wearing it, which was fine. They would just, for the rest of the time there, they'd say, oh, Blueberry, do this, oh, Blueberry, do that, whatever it might be. Which, I was just like, okay, whatever. But even like, that was kind of the end of that week. And then I came back, whatever, the next year, and some of the counselors were like, oh, it's Blueberry. Blueberry's
Oh.
back. And I was like, oh, it's still happening. Like, this is still a thing. So anyway, I eventually just stuck with it.
So let's talk about the big event that is probably coming. Walk us, a little bit through that, because I know that the objective is Mars. So how far is that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, right now the plans are to eventually be going to Mars in the early 2030s. But, that is pretty far away from now. But at the same time, there's still so much, I guess, that I would need to do to even, be considered as an astronaut officially. Kind of taking that traditional route. Obviously finishing school, getting a master's, having some work experience, and then eventually applying to the astronaut selection process. And typically with that, you'll have to do some basic astronaut training before you're even selected for a mission. So there's still like a lot of steps to even get to that point of possibly being able to go to Mars. But right now, kind of just focused on studying and getting like the degree part down. Gotta start somewhere. So really just kind of focused on kind of building up my career in terms of like in astrobiology and almost more of like a scientist. And then eventually, apply it to the space program.
So, and I've heard a few of your speech and so on, and you really focus a lot on, reaching your goal and your dreams, especially. So, what's your inspiration? I mean, aside from, space and so on, do you have like a person that inspired you specifically? Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was younger, I was just interested in space and going to Mars because my dad was basically like, no one has been to Mars before, so I was like, okay, cool, what's there? Why not go? But that was basically like as far as my brain reached. But obviously, the older I've gotten, I've learned a lot more about the benefits of going to Mars, which has kind of become more of like a driving factor for me. I really just want to contribute in some way and be a part of it in some way. But definitely there have been, people as well along the way who've helped. One in particular was astronaut Sandra Magnus. She was a female shuttle astronaut, and she basically just told her story and inspired me that it didn't necessarily matter the age that I decided to do this, that I could still become a reality nonetheless if I continue to work hard. So, her as well as others just giving advice every now and then have been amazing to keep me motivated.
Yeah, and so speaking about inspiration, in the future, you will become, well, you are in some way, an inspiration for your generation, the Gen Z. So, if you could talk, and I'm sure you have already, but if you could talk to someone, your age, what would you tell them? Maybe if they're lacking inspiration, or if they're like just feeling lost.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's, obviously no problem to maybe still be confused about what you want to do at this point. I mean, it's not necessarily typical for every kid to necessarily have it all figured out all the time. But it's definitely important to kind of look beyond, I guess, some of the typical jobs that we're all kind of thrown into. I feel like when we're younger, we mainly only hear about the typical, becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, becoming a teacher, or kind of like the basic jobs that were offered. But there really are so many job opportunities out there that are super interesting and that are very just non-traditional. Just speaking from the side of like the space program. If you're interested in food but interested in space, someone has to package the food that goes up to the actual space station all the time, or even physical therapists helping astronauts when they come back, or there's even people who study like the food psychology. Astronauts can't be eating mac and cheese every day or they'd go crazy. So there's actually someone who sits there and like studies what they eat and how that affects them mentally. And there's all like these crazy jobs that you would never think that exist, but there's someone filling that role. And so yeah, really just be encouraged to go and look out, start with school, figure out what your interest is. Maybe it is, math. Let's say, you could, be a teacher, be an engineer, which are two completely different things, but could both involve your interests. So make sure you're just looking at all those job opportunities to find one that you're really going to be passionate about and love.
Yeah, and sometimes pursuing your dreams can get difficult, hard, especially at such a young age, which you obviously are, and you've probably seen a lot of barriers and a lot of closed door. So, what do you do personally to overcome those barriers and to keep a positive attitude?
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, it was, growing up, I definitely had like a balanced life. Yeah, I did some stuff regarding space, but I was also a normal kid and keeping up with school and stuff. And, with that, space never necessarily got boring or anything like that because I wasn't always talking about space. I wasn't always just with my face in like a space book. I was also learning, other stuff as well and just being a normal kid. So, I do think that had, a level of wanting to stick with it and keep that motivation going, because whenever I was able to do something with space, it was exciting. I was happy to be able to go back and do something related to space. But I would definitely just say, balance in your life in general around, all the things that you want to do. Typically people are balancing, their professional career versus like their personal life. But, at the same time, just making sure you are having like a good balance. For me growing up, obviously I knew I was interested in space, but, I still played competitive soccer for 10 years and did dance and piano and all this, that, and the other. Not that I was going to pursue it, anywhere down the road, but just as something, fun to do with friends or whatever else.
So, if you have a message for our students, not just the newcomers, but all of our students, you have your stage.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, definitely to all of the kids looking at, big dreams and big goals, kind of like the biggest thing I could really tell you guys, especially from my experience of having something crazy like the dream of being an astronaut and wanting to pursue that, is really don't be discouraged, to be vocal about your dreams and about your goals. You never know where the opportunities are going to come from, so it's very important to tell people what you want to do. Definitely, be encouraged to talk about your dreams, because, you never know where those could lead or who people know. So not only figuring out what your dreams may be, but having that support system, being able to talk about them, and then also continuing to build on that motivation for pursuing them.